And Dean is asking, I learned the Alapin Sicilian as a beginner since I heard there's too much theory to learn. Now, as an intermediate player, I have some FOMO, fear of missing out, since open Sicilian games seem so dynamic and exciting. What are your thoughts on how to approach learning to play against 1c5 as white? Are the Rossolimo and Grand Prix also cop-outs to the real Sicilian action? Yeah, Dean, what can I say? First of all, thank you. Thank you for this question. This is honestly like a dream question of mine. I love it when people ask this question because I feel like I can deliver the cold-blooded truth. So the truth, in my opinion, this is all just my opinion, is that like everyone is worried about the theory nowadays. So there are people that aren't playing the open Sicilian because it's too much theory, and then there's just as many people who don't even play the Sicilian because they think it's too much theory. And the truth is that everyone thinks that everyone else like knows all the theory and is going to crush them all the time. And this is just like such an overblown fear. I feel like it's really overblown. Yeah, at the top levels, when one player really knows a lot more than their opponent, that's like a big advantage because both players at the 28, 27, 2600 level, they're so strong that if they even get like a small advantage out of the opening, they feel really good and they feel like they can use that to put pressure and convert it. But if they like know something really deeply, or if they manage to trick their opponent or catch them in some like actual like sharp preparation where like the position is just like a minefield for one side and like one wrong move means you lose. Like, yeah, that's a big deal at the top level. Take Dominguez's recent game against MVL in the Sinkfield Cup. Really brilliant game, but he had a ton of pressure against MVL out of the opening because I think he knew the line like slightly deeper. MVL ran into some problems, made like one mistake, second mistake, and then it was like all over. But that's like the elite level, and this kind of stuff really doesn't happen at lower levels. Like sometimes people fall into like traps, but this isn't like the same thing. So when people say like, oh, there's too much theory, this is a concern for like top players and like really strong grandmasters. And it's like, okay, even at, let's say, master level, if you play like really sharp openings, you're going to run into well-prepared players and they're going to know exactly what to do. And that's definitely not exactly a recipe for success. But the thing is like, there's going to be theory in every opening. Every opening has theory, and I made this point earlier, but it's like the amount of theory that you have to know really just depends on your level. So I actually don't know what level Dean is at, but if we're at like a low rating, like online, like you really don't have to know much at all. Even if we're up to like 2000, I think honestly don't have to know a ton. People are just going to be making natural moves in the opening, and the game is going to be decided mostly by who understands the middle game better. So my recommendation, whenever I get this question, is like try to study the middle games. Because people use this logic. They're like, oh, I'm going to get an opening every single game, so I should study the opening. And that kind of makes sense. But like, you don't know what line you're going to get. But based on the opening that you play, you do know what kind of middle game you're going to get approximately, right? So if you're playing the Sicilian, you know you're going to get a Sicilian middle game. So you're going to get a Sicilian middle game each time. My recommendation would be to study that structure, how to play Sicilian type of positions. Or if you know you're going to be getting a Grunfeld each time, or a Rui Lopez each time, or a Caro-Kann each time, I think it follows like just study the Caro-Kann middle games, the Rui Lopez middle games, the King's Indian middle games, right? You're going to be getting one of those structures every game, but it's going to be almost impossible to predict like which line you're going to get. So studying these individual lines, I think it's so inefficient because like one game out of 100, maybe you'll get like, the line you studied. More importantly is to like get a middle game position that you want. So my advice here for Dean and everyone else struggling with this kind of thoughts, because I know this happens to a lot of players, focus on the middle game positions that you want to play. Let me put the Sicilian on the board. So you have to ask yourself here, do you want to play the positions with opposite sides castling and both sides are attacking very open positions? And I'm not saying you have to play those. It's like teach their own. Like if you want to play those types of positions, play the open Sicilian. And as you get more games in, you'll get experience. You'll start picking up some of the theory, but more importantly, you'll learn the ideas and you'll know how to play these kinds of positions regardless whatever line you get in the opening. And then as you play more and more games, you'll learn some of the lines and you'll learn some of the tricks. And so, okay, you lose some games online, but like, who cares? Like, you'll get those points back once you become like a more universal player. Or maybe you don't want the really sharp stuff. And so if you want to play different types of structures, then the Alapin is a good choice. And the Rossalimo, like I mentioned, is also, or like was mentioned in the question, is also a very decent choice here. So these moves aren't cop-outs, but they are if you're like doing it for the wrong reasons, right? Because there's going to be theory all over the place. And I guarantee you this opening has a lot of theory. You know, if you play it against a much higher rated player, they're going to know it better than you. They're still going to get like some kind of advantage out of the opening where they just know it a little bit deeper. So you're never going to be avoiding theory, right? If you want to avoid theory, play b4 on move 1, play b3 on move 1. And even there's going to be like a lot of theory to study. So the point is there's theory everywhere. What you really want to be doing is finding the middle games you want to play, studying those middle games, becoming like a beast at playing certain kinds of positions. And then it'll be so much easier to choose your openings because you already know, like, I want to play this kind of middle game or I want to get this kind of position out of the opening. And it'll be so much easier to choose lines because you'll know exactly what you're kind of aiming for. I think too many people, they treat the opening like, oh, if I just memorize the moves, I'll get a good position. That's just not how it works. Even if you memorize a bunch of stuff and you get some computer advantage, if you don't know how to play the resulting position, like, you're just going to be busted. Which is one of the reasons I love the King's Indian so much, because I realize like people are preparing this stuff with the engine. The engine doesn't really help all that much in those super close positions. Like, as soon as you leave your theory, you have to think on your own. It's very difficult to deal with like the King's Indian counterplay. So I think it's just all about finding the middle games that you yourself enjoy, and then the theory and everything else will come from that. So if you like playing the structures you get out of the C3 Sicilian, a lot of times here after d5, you're left with an isolated queen pawn. Not everyone likes that. Some players feel really good about those positions. If you're fine with that, I think it's totally worth playing. Or these positions where you get the pawn on e5, and you get a lot of space here, but okay, your pawn on e5 is going to be a weakness one day. If you're happy with these kinds of positions, by all means, they're very, very playable until, basically any level. It's just, I think you have to be very clear about what you want, and then don't worry about the theory either way. From Dean's question, it sounds like, you want the dynamic and exciting action. Then definitely, yeah, the open Sicilian is the way to go. Jump in head first, the sooner the better. No one's going to know all that much anyway. You might get caught in like some quick opening traps, but what are you going to do, right? You just got to analyze your games, try not to get caught in the same thing more than once. And, eventually you'll kind of get a handle on all the tricky ideas that Black has. But ultimately, it just comes down to what kind of positions you want to play. Okay, guys, rant over. Oh, wow, we're down to 0 viewers. That's unfortunate. I'm just kidding. Let's go to the next question. Hopefully that helps. That helps Dean. It's all playable. It's just a matter of what kind of middle games you want to play. And don't worry about the theory. Everyone else is just as worried as you are.